So today we have probably our last session of review and detailing. I will include the detailed exam today, which I hope it was not too difficult. I saw the results and the detail problem, right? He has an average score of 42 points out of 50. So I guess it was easy. So probably both the practice and the difficulty helped. It was good because the exam, the average was about 77 out of 100, which is the aim. So I guess the exam was rather easy, which I'm glad. And actually only 5 people this time are under 50, right? Of those, one, he knows who he is, but he's just 18 points. It's the one who left the exam in 5 minutes. But doesn't matter. So I would consider just 4 people, and they're not excessively low. So let's see. In the cover, you have the facade. I think the Burberry shop in Cheongdam, Seoul, which is quite interesting, double layered curtain wall, which we'll not see. If I find the detail, it could be practiced sometime later. I will start with assignments because we have one exam left, one quiz. Quiz is not, well, it adds, of course, but the quizzes it's our kind of practice. And they don't have so much influence. So right now, what you can do to improve apart from attendance is assignments. And still I'm missing a lot of assignments. I will try to catch up the weekend. So I will have clear who is missing. So I will put a warning, but really assignments, final exam. So the second part. So there's not much we can do beyond what we did already. Then we'll see the detail of the exam, as I commented, and I will have, well, whatever I think is interesting, some more notes of envelopes, so we can start on Tuesday with the exciting construction management lectures, which is just 2 lectures and 1 quiz and 1 assignment. So in Blackboard, remember we have a checklist. I updated it with 3 notes. So now version is 5.2. Please download it and have it as a reference. I added some points because I started to put the note on many of your assignments. Just get 3 new notes. Please go there and use it. The new notes are in the point 9, which is one of the points I comment more in terms of marking and describing all elements in the detail. It is important because the books concentrate or focus in one specific part, but when you make a real detail, you have to tell what is every little piece you draw. For people who are going to build it, of course, but for you to demonstrate you really understand, you know what you're drawing. It is also about the reference lines, how to put them. The biggest problem is often they get confused with the drawing, right? So if we have the typical detail of facade with a window, the layers, and we put reference lines which are just in coincidence with the lines of the drawing. It's very hard to know what they are saying, right? We don't know if this is the floor or just a reference or so on. And that happens very often. So one thing I did is the unit mark in drawing dimensions. I noticed many of you had like many small, and it's like 200 millimeters and 1,200 millimeters, and millimeters appears all the time. And that makes the need to make very long writing, right, with plenty of units. So what we do is to put just a note all dimensions in millimeters. So usually in one drawing, we use only 1 unit. The full project should be in 1 unit, of course, but in some places it's more appropriate to use meters than millimeters. So in that case, you just put the mark and you don't need to repeat millimeters all the time. So you avoid confusion and it is much easier to read, to understand. The other thing is the dimensions in millimeter. This is a fight we have, especially from the States and Europe, with especially Korea and Japan. I don't know why architecture is dimensioned in millimeters, because the units we use are in relation with the size of the elements we dimension. And architecture obviously is best in meters or at most in centimeters. Millimeters we use only for details. So I don't know why that custom in Korea. My guess it is that it's a Japanese colonial inheritance. Especially, so I can understand in Japan architecture is almost synonymous of carpentry. And carpentry is a precision work. And Japanese are very precise. In Korea, without telling the better or worse, the precision is not millimeters at all, right? Actually, in Spain, I was told that putting 1 centimeter less or more in dimensions was silly in architecture because really there's no way we can control that. We already commented, for example, in the structures, we mimic the concrete slabs, which are just leveled by hand. And those slab borders in which we have the concrete pushing the form, then retracting with the curing and so on. There's many errors, but whatever. We cannot change that. The habit is the habit, so we have to follow the country standards. But I would recommend to use always the 1000 separator, even in 1000. I know the Places book in the details has the thousands without marks, and then the 10,000 is put the mark, right? It is easier to read, but I would be consistent and put the thousands marks everywhere. So it is easier to read. This is a very small note. One more note, which is new. This is not very important, but it's the color in construction drawings. So it is perfectly okay. You use colors in your details. That helps. And especially in assignments, competitions, publications, we have more freedom. So clarity is important. But in real life projects, in the construction sites, still in 2021, almost all work is done with a large size sheets, in which color printing is not as easy to control and as easy to make as the line drawing. And of course, in a construction site, they have like thousands of copies. So the price, also the cost has some influence. But really, in the construction site, the plan should be clear and the clarity is achieved by reducing the lines. And so we use only lines, right? Sometimes some filling, but yet workers and the collaborators, the managers are used to see the line drawing, but most especially on the construction site, we have wind, we have rain, we have sunshine. It is very hard to build with a tablet. Yeah, because we have freezing temperatures, we have sunshine, we have wind, things fall down, break, and one paper sheet is very easy to preserve. So it is a good exercise. You get used to the discipline to draw with lines. And I say this because for some reason, the SPC for verbal and graphic expression is included also in our course. So this is why we insist so much in assignments and the drawing quality. So please be careful and see also the note 10, which is also in the checklists. There are very unused tips. Of course, not everybody is doing structure, but for those who are doing the alternative assignment, I wonder if they follow this, just 7 tips, but which really help to make the drawings clearer. And for everybody, envelope, which is what we are doing since assignment 7. Again, there's very few tips, but things which help really make the drawings clearer. I brought some examples. So this is something that you remember. This is the plinth detail, right? So I took many examples from assignment 7, I think. So this is an envelope detail, right? So rather than just putting a set of pieces, we have to make very clear what is the envelope, right? So we have this coin, but there's an important part missing. The envelope is all that goes to the upper level. And many people forgot this part, and that creates one question. If we do not have the context of the book, we see some kind of a cantilevered enclosure, right? Which is just, let me clean this. So it will seem that the envelope just parallel to the structure, and it will be fixed in some strange way, which is possible, but this is confusing. And then the hatches also confuse. This part in the book is an isolation. So using the same hatch, some element which you understand is structural, is confusing. And of course, there's not excuse to put the copy of the drawing. The assignment was not about copying and showing the detail. We all know we have the book, we have the handout. It's for you to exercise in this kind of showing and understanding things. There was some people who actually do well. They, at all the points, of course, I wish the writing is a bit clearer and the drawing is nice, but still we can see all the things. What I don't understand, and this is the extreme case, why fragmenting all, right? And I show this and I comment because that fragmentary vision of things, that only seeing the details and not the big picture, is a problem I see in your, especially in your generation. I think it's a cultural problem or generational problem, I don't know. But we are used to small bits of information or small things, but we need to have the big picture, right? To know the generality and then go to the details. What is the difficulty to put all those data together in a large, well-constructed detail? This is very common. Again, this is the most extreme case, but yeah, the big picture, and in this case, it's almost literal, right? The integration in one detail is something I miss in this case. And this was quite correct. Almost all the comments include every little difficult point we commented in class. But well, I would insist on you, not only for detailing, when you study, you can see that from the lectures, when you read books, not just a small bits of information you get from Google and so on, you have to really create the big picture of everything in your mind. That creates knowledge beyond just bits of spare information. This is the opposite case. This is like well, we have many good assignments, right? But this is one example of clarity, good writing, not excessive detailing, but showing all the important points and pointing, every element is pointing clearly, well, in this case, a bit wide, but it goes to the detail. Also, this is wrong, right? This is working as a Reaper, so this will not happen. The problem would be to have this totally flat, and then the water will move around, right? Well, this is a small thing that you have to have clear, but in general, this is a good option. Some people did like a really careful drafting and a lot of detail, and that's perfectly okay also. But here we have every element is clearly pointed at and clearly annotated, right? There's no doubt, and there's clarity. However, the same students have, again, the same problem. Why the such detail was not finished? And this happens very often. Of course, this is a difficult part, but already we are cutting a lot of the detail. So this is very nice, very clear. And even here we say, well, we don't know where does this go out, probably goes under the seal, right? This is something we commented in class. This is something we don't always see when we have so many precautions. But yet it is very clear and clear. Now we can see almost everything that we need without a lot of complication. And all notes are short and they explain the thing. The only missing part was this, and I don't understand why. Yeah, this is again that mindset of getting too much focus on the small details on the fragments and losing a little bit in the context. This is a well-done example. Actually, one of the few who tried to complete the seal, right? Of course, this should have had a small tripper. Actually, not very nice seal, but okay, this has the full detail with enough simplification. Very few people, for example, identified the cap, which is one element we can just move out to replace the glass, make it easy. And again, this is clear, maybe writing a little bit too tiny. And again, I would try to avoid, this is again note 9. Avoid annotating inside the detail. In general, especially in small parts, here it's okay, right? Because we have plenty of space. But in general, we try to avoid that. Very few people note the frame. And one thing, this is a different opinion from the book. If you see the book detail, in the book they put the frame fixture with a big screw to the seal. This is the book, right? It is fixed to seal. But I wonder why they do it. This is a kind of a additional element. It's not very strong. In general, all frames are fixed to the fabric. So the element would be fixed to the better to a spandrel, right? Right. So this is something that even in a good book, and the Plastics is a very good book. It is a book written by people who really build. So they have the experience of building and they know what I'm speaking about. In terms of architecture, you have always to be careful with those which are pure academic and never built one thing, because the orientation is totally different and the vision of things. But in the case of the Plastics book, you can be sure that those guys are good architects and they know what they say. But I don't know why they do this. Still, we keep always improving things and changing, and I think this is one thing I would never do. Right? So always try to be critical, even with the good books. Not to say what we see in the blogs in internet. You have so much trash and confusion, and even more in published papers. Very careful with the papers. I think books in general are more reliable because the construction is not an academic problem, it's a technical problem. But that's a different thing. And this is again one detail which is very nicely done. I would miss, I know that the book doesn't have it, but you have to make clear you are not showing the totality. So in this case, it's clear. This is, of course, probably drafted in the iPad or with some drawing program, but many of you put the reference, which is okay. I think this is kind of waste of time. Just to repeat it, but it is good practice, right? So you do it if you want, but it's not necessary. What is interesting is that many of you put a mark like this and you showed the detail. And that's not true. What you are showing is really a small part, not even the full interior part. And then you know those elements are cut, they do not go to the end. So very careful with this, because I think except for the detail we saw before, almost nobody and very few people were clear about that point. You see that the cap is mixed, it's missing, sorry, not missed here. And one thing that many of you, and I think the book details like that, but in reality, very seldom you will have the sash, if we have the sash in perspective, right, with this cut, you will have no so often this kind of a shape, so you can put the cap in those kind of slits, right? In reality, the element will be straight, right? Because the standard, and those elements, they have many points, but they will be just by pressure. And this is like 3 points of contact, which will be pressed, and that will help to have that perfectly fixed. So I will put a question mark here, but I never saw this in timber. You might see it in industrialized, maybe PVC or some aluminum. So they have really the slit for their own proprietary band. And of course, it is very hard to do it in the cap, right? But again, I put a question mark here for you to understand this point. And of course, as we said, you have to mark everything so you really are clear and you demonstrate you know what you are doing. Very few people spoke about those elements. We have the opening of the fabric, which is not exact. We need some margin to put the frame inside. If it is too tight, it is almost impossible humanly to put it. And then we need elements to adjust that small gap between the fabric opening, right? So it's the fabric or the wall opening, and then the frame. Yeah, there is always a small gap. There is always a small gap, right, between the frame and the fabric. And this is a necessity, because otherwise it's impossible. This is the thing that happened with the drainage pipe in the roofs, right? We need some space to put things inside. This is something which comes from experience. So this is the adjustment element. So we know it's fixed, and that allows us to just to find the exact point. In that case, by the millimeter, if the constructor has good ability to do it. Let's go now to the following. This is the assignment 8, I think. Again, this is the extreme case of the bad assignment. You have to show the whole envelope at least, and then be very clear what is the layering on top of it, and make the lines in a way that really we understand. So what's the pipe and what's insulation gap? The pipe insulation gap are pointing at the same point, right? And this dimension is in the wrong place. You have to extend the waterproofing over the finishing point and so on. So this is one detail which will be confusing more than helping. So it's assignment 8, not 8 points out of 10. This is more or less a bit more carefully done, but who on earth can understand this? And this is the mess of arrows everywhere and bubbles. And if we go to the bubbles, who can see what happens inside those points, right? So this is the anti-detail. Also, the annotations are right? But the writing and the drawing is so careless. So understand me, this is not the need to make a perfect, beautiful, excellent drawing. It's just to be clear. And this can be totally confusing. We cannot see even so it's a vertical extension of what and where, right? And what are you pointing at? You have to follow the line. You have an element which points as brick, air gap, insulation, something that looks like concrete, and something that looks like insulation again. So this is purely confusion. This is a bit better, but still almost everything is missing, right? So, and I chose this because I appreciate that somebody tried to make the roof plan, which is quite confusing again, right? So I can understand that this is a division in 2 parts, and you have one slope coming here, probably the other slope coming here, right? You have this trench in the point. You have a slope coming here, a slope coming here, but this will be something that's probably is horizontal. You'll have this side slanted all the time, right? Or you have very, very steep element there, or a small slope there. But we try to avoid having things like that touching the wall. You will see it often, But if we see the plan, if we have the opening, it is very hard to work that kind of first border of the waterproof in this side, right? We will have to put, if we have the perspective, right, we will have to make another bend where we have already another bending and overlap of the waterproofing layer, right? So it will like many things being together. So we try to separate problems, not to accumulate many connections in one point. Sometimes we do with painting. This works well when you have the exit on the outside of the wall. So the pipe goes out and you have that box collecting the water. But if you go to the outside, right, so you have the drainage pipe with a box, and then it is collected from the outside, then it could make sense. You will have the difficulty of this connection again. But this kind of solution is something we, in general, avoid. You should try to have at least 30 centimeters or so to the wall, so you have a space really to work there, that element, right? And of course, you will try to have that ending point counter slope, so the water will not accumulate against the wall. Right. Let's go to one more. So this is a nice detail. Actually, it's taking the book, and again, the book, I had some critic, right? Because it's not always clear. This is what I said. You have the waterproofing, which is drawn straight, and then you put the detail and you put it bent. So this is correct. But what is the difficulty to show it clearly also in the detail? And this happened in more than half the class. Same in this point. So here we see that this is confusing. It seems that the element getting the water is over the waterproof as it is drawn. Then you draw it correctly on the top. But what is the difficulty again to integrate? You can make always the large detail. So large detail is okay, right? Maybe this is 1 to 20 and this is 1 to 5. That's perfectly okay. But 1 to 20 should be consistent, right? You have to make all your best as much as possible to avoid any kind of confusion. Even the drip, just putting the word is not enough. You have to really to draw the drip. And this, if this is too small, you put it bigger, but you have to draw it. And this is one of the notes I put more often. But we're going from really poor and confusing assignments to better done. And remember, this is just a copy of detail, right? This is just a copy, but the copy is with the purpose of to understand, yeah, to learn, and then to develop the ability to be creative. When we understand how things work, we can make our own details. This is not being a kind of a human scanner, right? Which I see sometimes the attitude of losing battery, but don't worry, we will finish. Oh, already 11:30. People just trying to replicate the drawing, but not really getting the logic and summarizing the points which are important. So be careful with this, because I see this kind of attitude very often. And those assignments, well, this is one of the good ones. So this is clear, simple. Still uses color, but color helps, right? We commented already about color. I would try to make a writing more simple, but okay, at least it is clear, right? I can read. Probably too small at points. you can always improve, right? But everything that we commented is clearly in this detail. This detail is big enough. Those images are clear. The only thing which was not easy to see was the pipe. So that blue was my drawing, right? So you have to make sure you understand the pipes. And I think many people were confused about this. You have one element which is usually made in one piece, which is kind of a conic element. Well, maybe this is like a too big, right? So it's kind of conic element with a pipe already in one piece, right? This is what you put on the concrete, right? And where you later put the addition and you put the waterproofing on the top, so you're sure it overlaps without reducing this hole. So some overlap is okay. And then this element has a small narrowing, so the following pipe can be put in, right? This is what this section says. And then that pipe goes down. So you just have two pieces, one piece inside the other. I think I explained it in the lecture, but you have to understand it and try to draw it clearly. So this was clear, and well, I see the gravel. This is kind of a mix of hand and computer work, but what I said, you don't need to complicate and add a lot of things. So minimum annotations, you don't need to have the whole explanation, just the keywords, and that's enough to have the detail under control. Then when you make your own detail, you know what to be careful with. And then only one note, this is from an assignment mine already. So probably of the early assignments, the only which was near perfect. Well, I'm missing something in the cut here. But in this case, I see that in every cut, we have the 3 layers of tiles. This is a very difficult detail, very tricky. And almost nothing is missing. Everything is clear. Well, I only annotated again. The texts are very small. Think that those drawings are not for your professor, are not for yourselves. You have to get in mind that those drawings should be read by anybody else. And you should not think that anybody else has good eyes, or they will have the patience to have the reading glasses all the time, or they will see it very slowly. People work very fast, right? So those dimensions which are very tiny, those texts which are very small, chances are that people will not read them. And sometimes this more or equal 25 millimeters, right? In some cases, it's so small that I read 225 millimeters and I put an annotation. This is not 225 because the writing is so small that people will read 225. Anyhow, I think this is the best I saw yet. Only one thing which I see very often is this kind of seaming. If you put this kind of a thick thing in drawing and you say nothing, or even if you write it, it will become silicone in the construction site. You will find these two sheets there with a nice, beautiful silicone element there. So when you draw, be very clear, try to avoid being confusing. And again, I know that in the detail I showed in the class didn't show it, but okay, you have to improve things. If you speak of ventilation and the insulation, it's better you draw the insulation. Otherwise, people do not know what is what, right? And you control it more the size. This is less important, but again, you have to try to be really clear and careful. And in this case, all the small details were very carefully done. So good for this presentation. And again, this is all drafted carefully with rulers. The style is not the problem. The problem is the clarity of the drawing. So I hope this helps you understand a bit more all those very short and very fast annotations I put by hand. Maybe it's a bit more confusing. I don't know. So from the exam, the detail, and I think it was easy. So we have one facade, and the photo shows it's a brick facade with a very interesting window with kind of a concrete jambs and a lintel, something that looks like a wooden window, something that looks like a concrete wall. So we can see the window sill and the plinth. So really it was, I did an effort to find that detail which is clear. There's not confusion at all. So probably it's very easy to see that B is 1 right at the veneer. The precast concrete reveal and lintel is clearly C. The plinth border with gravel and drainage areas clearly 3. The oxidized asphalt sheet, I could have said paper barrier, right? But I didn't see it. But obviously we have only one place, and we have to look for that thing which looks like asphalt, right? So F would be 4, right? That sheet. Rigid rock wool, mineral fiber board, 100 millimeters. So we know this is insulation, and we know this is the insulation standard. So this is 5. Oak wood window frame, and you knew that we would make the difference between frame and sash. Also, I know that in everyday language, we call sash everything, or everything is sashes, but we have to make the distinction. We are very technical. So we know that the frame is D6, and it's very ecological. Flaxseed oil protection is not even polyurethane paint. There's a very good protection, but especially in the exterior, you will have to probably renew every year. Aluminum sheet, 2 millimeters thick with tripper. We didn't say if it is the window sill, if it's a flashing, but the only thing we have annotated which looks like that is the window sill, which has clearly tripper. So J is number 7. Gypsum plaster with water-based paint. This is obviously interior finish. And the only interior finish I see is the suspended ceiling, probably this interior lintel, and this interior thing here, which is H makes 8. Oak wood window sash, the same element, so the sash will be really E. We have only left G, which of course, this is the reinforced concrete structural wall, which in this case is less than 25 because it has a small niche. So in this case, you could blame me. Okay, this is 25, this is not 25. But well, there's only choice left and 10. And I'm glad that it was more than 80% of the class. Sometimes easier details have worse results, believe it or not. And I think this is the insisting on the details. So now you should be, I think the full class will be comfortable watching those details and seeing how things are done. And furthermore, let me clean this because I think it's very easy detail. Probably final will be a bit more difficult. We have to balance always a little bit. A few more things. See the suspended ceiling. See how you have one element fixed to the ceiling and then another element getting the profile. So this is like a galvanized, if we make the perspective, galvanized steel elements, which are hanging points. And the other, so this point in the middle allows to regulate the height. So you can make it shorter, longer. You will have a regulation with the screws, right? And see how the fixing is asymmetrical, but you will try to have this balanced with the gravity center of the lower part. So it does not balance around, right? So there's interesting detail there. The other, see how the brick in this case is supported by strong. So we know that we saw in the photo that this was a precast concrete element. So bricks can safely be supported by these elements. So this is structural, the bricks perfectly supported. They have those elements, which was exam question, I think, or we asked it in the quiz probably. Those elements which make sure the brick veneer will not fall down, right, with wind suction or things like that. And we are just 5 minutes to the final. And then in this case, even though this is a plinth, but you will see it later, the brick is just hanging from a profile. So this is telling this is a strong steel angle with probably some strengthening the border. So if we see this perspective, we will have the angle fixed to the concrete, right? With some elements which rigidize that cantilever so the brick will not move, and then the brick will be put over the border, right? This is what we see here. So it's quite interesting detail. It gives a lot of information. And this is, again, building everyday detail. The other thing I want to annotate before we go home is the way the sash is in the line of the insulation layer. So the sash and the frame, the window, continues this kind of insulation line, right? There's not breaking. How do you fix this? Probably you will have some kind of a angle in which you can fix the frame and the, let's have a different color, right? You will have to find a way of fixing it. Probably you see here this angle. So I was guessing, but this is what I would do, right? In general, see how even they add some additional insulation to avoid thermal breaches. And probably this is by points. So you have the frame, you can fix in just a few points, depending on how big is it. So you reduce the thermal breaches, right, to the minimum. So there's more in this detail than just the things we asked, but I promised 10 questions, and this is all the 10 things I could make. Okay, so envelope, we were finishing this, but I think we'll have no time. So I gave you, I think I lost connection, even so in just a moment, I lost the connection and I have to enter again. You know, this happens, and I'm at the school now. And we have just 2 minutes left. Okay. I'm getting inside. Okay, now I share screen before it is too late. Now we have to go for lunch. And I don't think we need to start again. So I just included the detail, but we will not have time to see it today either. So let's pass over this. I will try to put the solution in Blackboard so you can see it, right? This is what he commented, and there was a difficulty. So this is the only glass element. The problem they had is that there was no way to put the upper floors because the cranes from the land didn't arrive. So they have to make a very strange setting to complete the 2 last floors of this element. And the other thing they realized, well, this is the slanted element, is that it collects dust, right? And nobody was aware of it. They said when it was done. I passed recently, and I think they have a hard time cleaning it. I leave one more example. I wanted to do it in class, but this is a US standard. It is a different style of drawing. So I wanted you to have a bit more practice on this and see more curtain walls, and one heavy curtain wall, which we didn't see. You will see it later. And then one nice building with some details, right? Planes, the cleaning element, the condition of the ground, and the ventilation insertion. And those elements which allow to have some kind of expansion. This building is very long, so you need to have every few elements, right? Some elements which allows the aluminum to expand and contract, and of course some rigidizers because it will be fluffy. And then the connection with the ground, you will see that condensation is a real problem. In this case, it affected the carpet only. Definition of cracks. I put this because this is a nice building. My God, it's the time. Okay, I will comment tomorrow. Actually, it was just a few details of the plinth. Assignment is nothing new, just a reminder, right? And for the end, it is very fast. Only one short survey you can do. Just please give your opinion and say goodbye if you want. already left somebody. Please do it and say goodbye and have a nice weekend, and see you on Tuesday.